So you did point out about the Pope's remarks today is there was something in it for everyone, but I want to review some headlines that kind of tell you, did they watch the same address that I did? We're rifling through some of these, but the Washington Post saying Pope Francis calls on a divided Congress to embrace immigrants. The New York Times saying heal open wounds, Pope urges Congress, tilting to the left. You should have seen the first paragraph of that story. That was a doozy. USA Today, in speech to Congress, Pope Francis urges action on immigration climate. Now, I want to point something out here, and I'm not as detail-oriented as the good Monsignor, but I was listening to his remarks line by line, and I added up the things that would be kind of offensive to conservatives and the things that might be offensive to liberals, just thinking of their respective positions. 9, I thought, would be the kind of stuff that liberals would like to hear. 9 topics that conservatives would like to hear. So 18 topics split right down the middle. Now, was that deliberate? I don't know. This much I do. The media ignored the stuff that the family thing, the sanctity of marriage thing, all those things, the religious extremism, the popping over to see the Little Sisters of the Poor. None of that got mentioned. Little Sisters of the Poor, by the way, legally fighting the administration on some of these requirements on abortion, all of that. So I'm starting to say to myself, that's not fair. That's not balanced. This is the Pope. To the Media Research Center's Brent Bozell. Brent, that stands out just by the way that the coverage, the headlines, and the paragraphs have gone. What do you make of it?
I agree with you. And it's not just that they're only saying one side of his remarks, but on things that he is saying that they're talking about, you're seeing them wildly distort them. You just gave some hot headlines. Here's a headline. If you go on MSNBC.com right now, and don't anyone dare do it until we're done here, this is the headline they've got up right now. It said, Pope urges Congress to act on agenda tilting to the left. After everything you just said, that's the headline of MSNBC.
And by the way, environmental references, Brett, we got to stress that whole thing was only 2 sentences today. Now, it was a big chunk of his remarks at the White House, that I grant you, but also at the White House ignored yesterday was comments on religious extremism and not paying attention to people's religious freedom. That got ignored. All I'm saying, by all means, mention the environment. That was a big part of the centerpiece of his thoughts. But today, for example, it was a small sampling, and it ignores all the other stuff he was talking about.
Yeah, but look at what he said yesterday. Look what was ignored. But we looked on all the networks, on CNN, not a single network news outlet caught the visual and the words of Pope Francis turning and rebuking Barack Obama on religious liberty, which is exactly what he did. He turned and rebuked him. Now, later, he gave a thanks to Obama for their positions on the environment. Guess what was all over the news? It was the latter. It was not the former. This is the one-sided story. Chuck Todd, I want to tell you this.
By the way, Brent, I know you are a bit, Brent, I know you're a busy guy and you're watching it, but you didn't watch Fox Business, which if you don't have, you should demand, Brent. But we did get into that only, and I'm making a light point to make a very serious point that you are, that it's very interesting how the media picks and chooses these stories. I'm not here to bash the media, but a lot of people get their impressions of this pontiff and what he's saying through the media coverage and these headlines and these paragraph stories, and they're not getting, for example, what you just said about what the president was saying about religious freedom. But continue that thought.
Neil, not to pander to you, but I've been listening, I've been watching you all afternoon, and you have been all afternoon talking about both sides that are being represented by the Pope on this trip. And you're absolutely right. So it's mind-boggling to me that Chuck Todd on NBC says today he's talking about the Pope's address about the spirit of cooperation. And Chuck Todd concludes that what the Pope is calling for us is not to have a shutdown in 2 weeks. And then he said to avoid this, quote, sort of silly fighting. Now, sort of silly fighting is going to deal with Planned Parenthood and that house of horrors. And let me tell you, the one person on this face of the face of this earth who would not call it sort of silly infighting would be Pope Francis.
That's very well put. I might leave you with something that's very powerful for me, but the media largely ignored talking about these religious freedoms. That freedom remains one of America's most precious possessions. All are called to be vigilant, precisely as good citizens, to preserve and defend that freedom from everything that would threaten to compromise it. Hugely powerful language, ignored as if it wasn't even mentioned.
His call for the respect for human life got a huge standing ovation. I bet you won't see it anywhere on the news tonight.
Yeah, that line, protect and defend
Except for
human
Fox
life
Business.
at every stage of its development. And to your point, Brandon, we kind of make light of some of this. By all means, cover what he said of the environment. It was a very small part, by the way, today in his remarks. But cover this other stuff. I think the Pope would appreciate that. Just be fair and balanced about it. He did add at the end, by the way, that's why I get Fox Business. If you don't get it, demand it. But his English was so awkward, you didn't quite hear it. But Brent, thank you seriously very much, my friend.
I heard God bless Cavuto too.
You know, he's such a knucklehead. But no, thank you very much, Brent. And again, we kind of joke and make light of this, but I did it so for the reason here that when we cover a pontiff coming to this country, whether you like him or not, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not, whether, as the Pope said today when he was on the Capitol balcony, if you don't want to pray for me, if you're an atheist, just give me good wishes. All that is part of the coverage of the pontiff. And get everything in. Because I tell you, he's trying to get under, I think, everyone's skin, which is what popes should do. It would be what Jesus would do if he came back, get under everyone's skin.